Yeah.
You know, and the mates, and you're going. And what happened was we, as I said earlier, we had a little pub band at Mum and Dad. We were doing 4 or 5 nights a week, you know, from all over the place, from Cootehill to Roscommon, you name it. We were doing them, little pub gigs. But we started to incorporate some of the Horslips stuff into it. Right. And it was funny because when you arrive at the gig, at the wee gig, the boss of the pub would come out and go, I don't know what you boys are doing, but this is bloody great. He says, they've been in here since 4 o'clock. The place is stuffed, he goes. And all we had was 2 or 3 Horslips songs. But they were waiting all night for it. Yeah. And sort of that was the moment that we thought, hang on a second, there's something happening here. And that's genuinely the truth. That really did happen. They loved us, you know. The pub owners were coming out. Whatever you're doing, it's great because the kids, they're coming into this pub and they're in here since 5 o'clock waiting for you to come. Yeah. So it was great. So that was kind of, and of course, how we learned about the other bands, we had no clue. Because I see myself as a purist and traditional. I could tell you all about the Bothy band and the Dannon and the Chieftains and you name it. I could tell you anything about them. But as it came to rock music, I had never a clue. So people would come up and we'd play the Horslip tune, you know, as best we could. Well, we thought it was pretty good, but I don't think it probably obviously wasn't. But for where we were at the time, we thought it was great. And people would come up to us and say, hey, you know, do you play any Black Sabbath? And we're going, what? Who's that? And of course, I would run out the next day to the bus stop in Enniskillen. That was the local record shop, and I'd buy a Black Sabbath. And the next you play, we learned Paranoid, and we stuck that in as well. And the next thing, do you play any Rory Gallagher? And we're going, Rory who? Who's? Oh, he's the best guitar player in Ireland. He and we're going, oh, I better go and suss this out. So off I go, and the first album I actually bought of Rory's was Against the Grain. And of course I just couldn't believe it. It was just like, and Rory's career was well established. That's how late we came to it. So I'm going, this is just incredible. I just couldn't believe a guitar could be played like that. I had Johnny in one, and then there was Rory, and it was just like, this is totally mind-blowing stuff altogether. Yeah, it was just wonderful. So again, I tried to sort of emulate and do little bits of that, and of course we would start putting in little bits of Rory into the set, and then some people started booking us then, saying, would you do a whole show of these bands, and that's new music, and that was how we kind of discovered it, because the punk thing was running in parallel with it, but we weren't really that interested in it. We became aware of it because of the Horslips and stuff like that. There was a whole movement there that we knew nothing about at all. You know, and absolutely, so we were fast learners, and then we started to watch the music, like the Old Go Whistle Test, and that's when I first seen Lizzy play, you know, and I couldn't believe it. I think it was with Gary Moore, and it was a solo project actually. That was the first time I'd actually heard Lizzy, and I think it was Gary had his one of the I can't remember, it was a solo album he had out, Back on the Streets. That album, that's when I first seen Lizzy play.
If I tell you that I'm in love with you, don't believe a word. No, don't believe a word. Please don't believe.
You know, and it was just that completely blew our minds all together. So it was from then on in, we were hardcore Lizzy fans, you know, we just couldn't believe it. And we went back and so we'd go back and source all the music, but I was aware that there was a movement happening, you know, and that movement, we were very proud to be we were lucky in the fact that we ended up supporting the Horslips on the tour, and that really made big inroads for our band. You know, and out of that we got management, and it was just trial and error. It was just by chance, really. It was.
That's-
We were really big fans of theirs, and then somebody or my sister or somebody plucked up the courage to tell them that we actually played, right? And nothing to do with Barry Devlin, but we actually do a support to them. So he actually came to the house to hear us play. He actually came to the shed where we rehearsed to play. So he thought, he said, I didn't know what to expect really, And he says, these boys started up, and he says, he went, oh, I better go back and practice. Is what he said. So he says, wow. He says he was just being, I think, kind. But he took the time to come down there, and if it hadn't been for Barry, I don't think it possibly would have went any further than us just playing in the shed.
Yeah.
And then he offered us that tour, and then out of that, then we got management. Their tour manager became our manager, and from then things really started to kick up. But we really had no idea what we were doing. We hadn't a clue. We didn't know. Somebody came up to us and said during the course of one night we were gigging, we're packing up, and they go, to make it anywhere in this business, you need to write your own songs. And we go, what? I hadn't a clue. Didn't know that. Oh no. They said, if you want to try and become a serious musician, you need to write your own songs. So out to the shed we went. And I think the first thing we ever came up with was a track called Hitchhike, and it was a drum solo. So we built the whole track round, a riff, and then let Tommy do his things, because we hadn't a clue about writing lyrically or anything like that. So this was the first effort we actually made, and there is a rare recording of that. And funnily enough, the guy that engineered that for us, we did it in a little hall, and he brought the Horslips mixing desk down, and he just set us up on the stage. Stephen Airey, who went on to be U2's production manager, right? Yeah, it was, and Stephen was helping us in many things. Sure, I'll help you. He said, I'll bring the Horslips gear down. We set it up like a real gig, and we just played it live, and that was the first single we brought it out as a single. Can you imagine that? I didn't want to listen to a drum solo on the radio. That's how naive we were, but it worked. It worked, and bit by bit, then we started to write the songs, And of course, then we became really aware of, in order to make it successful, you needed to have sort of a good management and knowing what you were doing. I mean, our aspirations didn't go any further than playing the dance halls. We thought if we could get onto the dance hall circuit, we'd be the same as Horslips. We thought, this is great. There couldn't be any more to life than this. This is it. You've reached the pinnacle, But when you get there then, and we were fortunate because within a very, very, very short space of time, we were lucky enough. We did almost an impossible thing. At the time, most bands were doing demo tapes and sending them into the Dave Fanning show, whatever else like that. The bands that were around at that time, which weren't too many, but there might have been a few around Dublin, and there might have been a few around Cork, but nothing really. And there certainly wasn't anything round our way. Absolutely nothing like that. There might have been a few in Derry, I'm not sure. But what we did was we saved up all the money that we had from the gigs, and we saved that money to go into the studio to do the first official bootleg album. Now Joe had been over to London, who was the manager at the time. Joe had been over to London, and he's seen the blues band. They were called the Blues Band, and they had an album that they did that way. They self-financed themselves. So it was, we were taking some of the punk ethic of doing things for ourselves. You know the way that the punks,
Independent.
Independently, they were doing things. They were making their own clothes. They were doing their own design. They were doing all that. So we took the same. I suppose it was part of that. It was part of the punk movement. We said, well, we'll do the album ourselves. We're never going to get somebody from Atlantic Records to come over and see us playing and bashing about in the Wales Donegal. Or the Corncutters Rest at Donegal. I don't think so. So we did the album, and we did it in a day in Slane Studios. In Slane Studios, there was John D was the name of the guy. John had a studio there, and we had enough money to go in for the day, and we did the entire album in a day. And I think they took Stephen Iredale again. Stephen, that went on to work with you too. Stephen actually mixed it and made it presentable, and that was the start. And out of that came you know, because we did that, we were fit to send it to radio stations, you know, and they're going, well, who's this band that has an album out? And they're going, you know, most bands only, who are these guys? So, I mean, it opened a lot of doors, even though it was very naively done and it was cheaply done, and we really didn't know what we were doing. We really didn't know. And I think AC/DC's Back in Black had just come out. Right, so that'll give you a bit of a time frame as to when we were doing this.
Yeah.
And I remember them promising us that it would sound like Back in Black. And when we heard the playback, I remember Tommy or maybe John said it's more like Back in a Tin Can. That's what it sounded like. So it was really, but having said that, it laid the path, and we weren't long sort of developing and learning the ropes really fastly, you know. And of course we became more aware of bands like with Lizzy and stuff like that, and we started getting festivals here and there, and we ended up doing the this was about 1982. We ended up doing the Liston Matchmaking Festival, and Philip Leonard was on it. He was on a solo career that day, and from what I remember, from what was said, was that we were on stage, and Philip made the big entry into the festival site in his big Mercedes, and he had his blacked out shades on. He just looked a rock star. But we were actually on stage. But he knew Joe because Horslips had played with Lizzy in England, right? So they knew each other quite well. So Joe's standing up on stage, and Phil comes up and saying, and he stood listening for a few minutes, and he goes, "Who's the boys?" You know, they're a wee band. Joe says, "I'm looking after." Jeez, he says, they remind me of the very early days of ourselves, you know. And Joe says, "Do you think so?" "Oh, he says, it reminds me." He says, "I tell you what," he says, "why don't you ring the office when this festival's over?" He says, and he says, "we'll sort something out." And that's how we ended up on the farewell tour with Lizzy. It was Phil himself actually got that.